Hey everybody, so welcome back to our Node.js killer project with PostgreSQL. So this is part 4, and you'll notice a couple of things. One, we have a different color scheme. It's been a while since I've continued this series, and I do apologize for that. I've been moving around a lot, and life's just been sort of going a little crazy with my own personal things, but I am back and I'm going to be making many more videos with a lot more content and in different languages as well. But I felt it was only fair to finish off this series because everybody, has been some great support, and thank you all for sticking through it. So we'll go through, finish it off, and get our sort of web service up and running with Postgres. So where we left off, we basically had our database connecting. We had a couple of issues which we managed to resolve, and that was in part 3, so I recommend you check that out. In this sort of, episode, or this part, we're going to be taking a look at migrations. So we want to figure out how we can get our database to sort of update to its latest state every time, basically creating user tables and things like that. So I'm a little unfamiliar with the project, so you'll have to bear with me whilst I take a look at where we got to. I've had a little quick look. That was it. We created a few routes, and we got our database connection. I believe we have npm run start, correct, and npm run watch. That was it. So we got the watcher. So as it's been such a long time, I'm going to just change a couple of things in our package.json. Also, I've managed to update this to a new repository just because that's where things should kind of go. You'll notice that I have a horrible format that I really hate, which I probably should get rid of for JSON files. It gets rid of the double quotations, so make sure you put those in there. I will change all this up, and I'll probably migrate everything over to Emacs because that's what I've been using quite a lot of, but for the moment Tmux and Vim is still quite nice, but I really don't like this. But anyway, we're just going to rename this watch to dev, just because personally I prefer npm run dev, and that'll allow us to run our development sort of environment, which we'll upload. So the next thing we need is migration. So if you remember, we created a user and we connected to the database, which was great, and we added some querying syntax through using connection pools. So what's next? Well, the next thing we want to do is we want to add migrations. Now migrations are basically allow us to have SQL files, or in JavaScript in some regards. But basically they're allowing us files that we can sort of change the state of our database, and then when we push it live, that will sort of continue as well, and it keeps it in a structured way. It's kind of the best way to explain migrations. I'm probably not the best person to explain it. It's harder to explain when it's coming off from the top of your head, but there's a lot of resources about why migrations are a good thing and what they should do. But it's basically to keep your database as structured as possible, whilst allowing for sort of sequential ordering of database updates and sort of schema updates as well. So let's say you create a users or a register or a user table locally. You can create that using a migration, and then when you go to deploy in production, your migration script should all run through, and you should sort of match up without having to manually make edits in your table. And that's kind of a simple explanation. There's plenty of other reasons why you would do it as well. Let's say you want to update all of your accounts tables, and you want to suddenly add an extra field in for everybody. You can easily do that with migrations as well. It's just a really easy way of basically adjusting your data set in a structured way. So what are we going to use? I'm just going to have a quick look at npm. There's plenty of migration packages out there, so feel free to use one that you find best. But in this one, we're going to look at, which is a good question. I don't know which one we're going to look at. Just having a quick look now. There's quite a few out there. I think Postgres migrations might be the best one. Oh no, it definitely isn't. So I mean, there's different ones depending on the language. The one we're going to use is basically a SQL type one. We're not going to be doing anything other than pure SQL type migrations, and we want it to be a real simple sort of migration tool. Problem is, a lot of migration tools, especially the ones that I'm looking at, are very much dedicated to sort of using DSLs, which is like language specific, but we don't really want that. We want to just have, we want to have direct to, I guess, we just want to be directly migrating using SQL files because I think it's the best way to learn. Okay, so we are back, and I found the tool I want to use. It was the first one, Postgres Migrations. So let's go ahead and install that. This allows for us basically to use SQL files, which is kind of nice. It helps you learn SQL syntax, especially in the form of Postgres. So I'm actually a big fan of it. So there we go, we've installed that. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to incorporate this before we actually write our migrations. So we need to go into our database directory, which was just here. But this one we're going to add a new file called migrations.js. And this is where our migrations is sort of going to exist, or our migration tool. So we're going to require the new file that we added, which is Postgres Migrations. And we're going to require our configuration as well. If you remember, we added this in. Yeah, so I got a new color scheme, which I really like. It's slightly different from the Dracula one. I had Dracula for years, so it made sense to actually change this out. I think this is Nord or Doom Nord, one of the two. But I've been using Emacs a lot as well, and it kind of ties up nicely with the Emacs theme. Though I have actually recently just changed all my Emacs files to a managed one because I didn't have the time to manage my .emacs directory. Okay, cool. So this is going to be our run function. This is going to actually run our migrations. And this is basically going to take in the configuration. And do something with it. If you can hear my PC, I do apologize. I've got a new tower PC to do all of this fun stuff with. But it's probably a little noisier than the laptop, but it definitely allows me to record and do things faster, I guess, which is kind of nice. Alright, so we're going to use string interpolation here to get the node path. And we're going to actually load a directory called migrations, which is the directory we're looking at. So we're not going to keep this in our source because it's not a source file. We're actually going to create the file here, so it'll be migrations there. So if I run tree, you'll kind of see, oh, I don't have tree on this one. Let's do that. I'm debating whether I'm going back to Linux or sticking with Mac OS. I really like Linux, but I bought a monitor that doesn't work in Linux, so which is kind of annoying. So I may actually have to take the monitor back, but I've got a couple of days before I have to do that, so I'll see how I feel. I do love Mac OS, but I also love the idea of free open source software. So we run the tree here. We get a lot of stuff from our, let's see how we do tree with getting rid of files, because ignore match arrays, include directory names, P was pattern matching, list only files that match the pattern given, do not match files that match the pattern given. Okay, so let's try tree I. That didn't work at all. That did. Okay, so that shows you what our tree looks like. It's kind of a nice little dump, but nothing too exciting here. But so now we've got the migrations up at the same level with our source directory, which is going to be important. Okay, so we access that file, and then what we do is return migrate user password host port, and we're going to parse int on this because that's quite important. Database and dir directory. Okay, so that will basically migrate. We've got no errors when we've loaded, but that's because we're not actually doing anything. So that's probably one of the next things we want to do. So it depends where to load that. This is probably the best question. I would think the best place to do it would be in our database directory, which is going to be here. We probably want to do it before we load up our initial pool of connection pool. And what's nice about here is we get all this information for free. So let's do it there. So wait, migrate dot run, and we were passing in all this information, so we can just pass that again. Perfect. Now we're having a reference error because migrate is not defined, which is correct. So we just need to import it in, and we import it from the local migrations.js if you want to, but I prefer to do that. And there we go. That's it. So that's all the code we need to do to get our migrations up and running. So now let's actually get started on a migration. So again, I'm not too sure what we want to do with this app. I guess it's just going to be a simple API. I think in one of the next videos I'm planning, we're going to look at actually the Phoenix framework on Elixir, which I've been playing around a lot with. But yeah, I'm not too sure what we want to do there either. I guess on this one, we could just do, I guess, the standard to-do list. That's pretty standard application. Everyone kind of knows what that is. So, all right, perfect. So as we're creating a to-do list, let's create the list first of all. So we're going to create our first migration, and we're going to prefix it with 00001, just so that things are done in order using file names, and we'll create our list table. Okay. Yep, so some errors I really need to fix out my dot files. Okay, so first of all, we're going to do create table, do list, and we're going to give it an ID. Now, a lot of people usually use integers for IDs. We're actually not going to do that just because there's some issues with having sort of integers as IDs. You can run into certain issues such as collisions if you ever merge two databases, which is a real pain. And you might do that, and it's kind of easy to say you're not going to do that at this stage, but it definitely does happen at certain points. So I tend not to want to do that. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to use UUIDs, which are a little bit nicer. So we're going to do UUID. I'm going to set that as the primary key, and we're going to do default of UUID generate v4. Now I'm not 100% sure if this will work. It's just been a bit of a time, but I think, let me just double check this. UID generate Postgres. So there's different extensions you can have. I think we're going to do different. We're not going to do this way. Just going to have a quick look. So we want to use PG Crypto to do so. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. You can do generate v4, but I think there might be an easier way if we use PG Crypto. Let's just have a quick look at another old project that I have. probably the best way to go about it. So I'm thinking, yeah, definitely going to do some other projects, most likely with Elixir. If you don't know what Elixir and Phoenix are, they're really great sort of full stack framework that allow you to basically, yeah, you can build some really cool stuff with them. It's similar to Ruby on Rails, I guess, but it's a lot. I really didn't like the idea of it at first, but I gave it a go because I really like functional programming languages, and I thought that it looked pretty cool. And yeah, I really like it. It's not as sort of, I guess, it's not as constraining as I thought it would be. I thought it would be really quite forceful in the conventions, and you have to use command line commands or mixed commands as they call them. But yeah, it wasn't actually too bad. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do gen random UUID. That is the main command that we want. Hopefully you can't hear all these errors I'm getting, and if you can, I do apologize. It's kind of annoying. All right, so in order to do that, we also need to add a Postgres extension. So let's do that as well, which is going to be PG crypto. And this should be installed with your Postgres, or this should be available for you within Postgres anyway, so you don't have to install anything else, which is kind of nice. And we're just going to generate a random UUID, which should be cryptographically secure, so it won't have any collisions. I mean, not unless you're it just most likely won't have any collisions. And a UUID is basically a 128-bit number, but it's serialized in such a way that's kind of readable. And having a UUID basically gives you a nice unique identifier. It should be unique across your database, and it's going to be very difficult, so nobody will be able to guess what other UUIDs are. So it kind of gives you a little bit of security there as well. When you're using serial IDs, if somebody is ID 2000, then they know that there's probably 1,999 entries before them that they can just sort of run through and see other things that maybe they're not supposed to. Not that that is ever any sort of great security. You should, always have access control built into your APIs and your websites, but it's just something a little nicer, just to add to it, especially for things that are particularly meant to be public. Okay, cool. So you've got we got our ID. This is going to be the to-do list ID, and we can generate a random UUID. To do so, we probably want a list of tasks, but we're not going to store that in the to-do list. So at this stage, we probably only really want our ID, which isn't very much, but we will grow into that. That's the whole point of migrations. We're going to be able to add to this. If we probably also want to just be secure, and this is kind of a good practice to add timestamps in. Now, a lot of more modern frameworks will generate this for you, usually quite easily, but we don't have that here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do created at. We're going to just create this as a timestamp. Now, you can create it as a timestamp with time zone, but what we're going to do is we're just going to create it as a naive timestamp, which is a timestamp with no information, and we're going to, in our application, format it to be UTC, which tends to be good practice. You can do a timestamp with time zone to be a little bit easier. Well, we're not going to do that just because I want to be slightly difficult here, and we're actually going to change created at, which is what I would normally do, but it's not necessarily true, so to instead of that. And the default is just going to be current timestamp, and we're going to create updated at as well. Perfect. So that's our initial migration. If we now take a look here and restart the server, that should be it. It doesn't look like there was any issues. So let's have a look. Now, I can't actually remember what the database name was, so I'll just go over here and check it out. Okay, so it was KOYT. PSQL KOAYT. There you go. So you see now, and before, I probably should have shown it before, but there was nothing in there before. You'll have to take my word from that. But afterwards, I mean, we can actually delete this database. Let's do that so I can show you what there was before, because we should always trust rather than verify. Okay, so let's close this down because I might complain. Drop database KOAYT, create database KOAYT. Sometimes it's just easier to take an easy route, isn't it? Okay, now if we go into this database, you can see, so /DT shows you sort of your tables, and there's nothing there. Now if we run this, we do /DT, there we go, we've got our new table. So we've got our to-do list, which is, what we're expecting. We created one here. But what is this migrations table? So if we do select all from migrations, you can see that we have two things that have occurred. The create migrations table, which is sort of a meta task, which has a hash. This is actually built into the Postgres Migrations library that we were using. And it tells you what time it was executed at, and it gives you the hash. Don't worry too much about the hash. The hash is basically a hashing function run over the file to sort of keep the contents as a number that if you hash that file again, that number will also appear. So it's a way of determining whether something has changed in that file and when it shouldn't have. And so once you've sort of created your migrations, you don't really want to edit them. Now, it's kind of difficult for us because we have this running as dev, but it's okay. We can just sort of tear it down and rerun it again. We shouldn't worry too much about that. It's just in production, you want to make sure that those hashes do not change, so you can guarantee the consistency of your data. But you can see here the create list table. That is the migration that we have named there, and it's index number 1. And that's basically it. So let's go ahead and actually create a to-do list, or insert into to-do list using default values. Not using, just default values. Okay, so that inserted one, we can see there. Let's do select all from to-do list. And there you go, we have a random ID, we have the time that it was inserted at, and the time that it was updated at. Now, this inserted at and this updated at actually isn't correct. They are to my local time, which is at 23:31, but that is not UTC time. So that is an issue we're going to have to solve. Now you can do timestamp with time zone, but we will actually figure another way of doing it. So we're going to delete that default shortly anyway, but for the meantime it is okay. So let's create another one. Okay, and now we've got two. You can see that they've occurred one after the other, but the IDs are random and different. And this random is cryptographically secure, so it's okay. Later on, we'll be able to reference these to-do lists by their IDs. And we're not expecting users to remember these. These will just be given or assigned to a user. But that's basically it. That's how we have created our first migrations. What we're going to actually quickly do is probably get rid of these default current timestamps, just because we're not going to use timestamps with time zones, so we're actually going to want to create these ourselves. Now to do that, we've just changed this. You'll see if I run this now, it will actually throw an error because the hashes don't match. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to just manually drop table to-do list and drop table migrations. So we'll delete these, run that again, and there you go, you see they've been recreated with our new approach. And if we try to insert this time, we're going to fail because we don't actually have a timestamp. So perfect. What we'll do in the next episode is we'll start taking a look at how we can assign, or how we can create these to-do lists in our code, and we're going to put these timestamps to be correct. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope this video was worth the wait. Thank you so much for persevering, and I'll see you next time.